A woman who inherited a dark family legacy has revealed the horrific impact it had on her life. Days after just turning 18, Brianna, the eldest daughter of her family, noticed strange occurrences in her house. We're talking glasses smashing off of counters, TV turning itself off and on when nobody was in the room, etc. She said that she could feel in the corner of the room there was something lingering in the darkness. She could feel like something was watching to see her reaction. Well, one night Brianna saw a girl's figure in the garden, but when she went out to investigate, what she found shocked her. Placed on a mound of dirt were teeth, which suddenly disappeared when Brianna turned around. She looked online for answers, and then she discovered evidence that it was maybe a poltergeist haunting her. Despite her terror, her parents wouldn't believe her, and she was left feeling even more alone and unable to sleep for fear that the ghost would get her. She continued having nightmares, including one where she felt a cross being burnt into her arm. The more incidents that occurred, the more she would confide in her mother, and the mother would dismiss the nightmares. But Brianna was left with a feeling that her mother did in fact know what was going on, but not telling her anything. Eventually, her mother told her she'd had experiences of the paranormal when she was growing up, which had led her to burying a mysterious package to protect the house. Her mother went to see a witch doctor who had told her of the curse on their family, which was why she saw a charred face standing at the bottom of her bed at night. Thomas Randelli was on his deathbed when he confessed to his only daughter that he was one of America's most wanted fugitives and had been on the run for more than 5 decades. Ashley was like, it felt like a weird dad joke. He was the king of terrible dad jokes. And at that moment she was like, okay dad, you changed your name and the authorities are looking for you. Sure, haha, sure they are. But she said that when he told me his name, his real name, she looked him up and she saw all of these articles like Vault Teller robs bank, and she realized, yeah, that's my dad and the authorities are looking for him. Thomas was a 20-year-old bank teller at the Society National Bank in Cleveland when he walked out at the end of his workday on a Friday in 1969 with a paper bag containing $215,000, which is like $1.7 million in today's money. The theft wasn't discovered until a few days later, and he was never seen again. This is a twisted family joke that turned out to be based on an even sicker reality. For many years, the West offspring were told, if you're naughty, you'll end up like Heather under the patio in the back garden. Well, when the police heard about the disturbing family joke and began to investigate, they uncovered a terrifying husband and wife serial killer team, Fred and Rosemary, or Rose West, who targeted unsuspecting young women and even 2 of their own descendants for their own warped means. While living on Cromwell Street in Gloucester, England, the couple turned a basement playroom into a chilling chamber of hell, where victims would be harmed, killed, and buried under the cellar floor. When the couple ran out of space there, they moved to the garden, where even more innocent victims were buried. 2 Illinois brothers claimed they buried the bodies of their sister and mother in their family's backyard, at least according to police. The brothers told investigators during interviews that their mother died in 2015 after being pushed down the stairs by their sister, and then they claimed their sister died of the big bad C disease in 2019, although this particular virus wasn't detected in the US until January of the next year. State officials had no record of either woman's death, and the brothers were like, yeah, we buried them because we couldn't afford a funeral. Well, when the police dug up the women, they also found several animals buried in the backyard. And by the way, the version of events offered by the brothers changed several times as they spoke with investigators. The pair had accessed their residence by crawling through a window, and they'd kept animals there, and this was a hoarder's paradise. Ugh, icky. 5 family members pleaded not guilty in 2019 on charges connected to the deaths of 2 offspring whose bodies were found buried in the backyard of a Georgia home. Mary and Elwyn Crocker were each barely old enough to babysit when they died 2 years apart, according to investigators, and their bodies were found buried behind their family's home. 5 family members, including their father, their stepmother Candace, are charged with felony killing, cruelty, and other crimes. Other suspects include Kimberly Wright, Candace's mother, her boyfriend Roy Prayer, and step-uncle Mark Anthony Wright. Jackson and Dale Villarda's home was a full house with 5 offspring, 2 of whom were from Dale's previous marriage. But on January 13th of 1984, Dale decided to go on a solo day trip, and everything was normal until Chris, one of Dale's descendants from the previous marriage, failed to return home. That night, Chris's mother reported him missing with the local police department, but in a strange twist of fate, his family received a telegram addressed to Dale and signed with Chris's name that same week, which seemingly explained his sudden departure. The note said Chris was going to run away from home to LA, don't worry about him, but there was some alarm bells that went off for the family, because there was an apology in the letter. An apology for being very rude, along with the phrase, Jackson was right. Sadly, the family eventually moved away, no leads were found, until a young couple living in California in 1998 wanted to renovate their home. The husband went into the crawl space under the residence and found a shoe. Days later, the wife's sister went to investigate the strange shoe, and she was horrified to find that it was actually connected to what appeared to be human bone. Soon enough, the identity of the body was confirmed. It was Christopher, and he'd been fired at once in the head and twice in the back from behind, and the nature of his wounds suggested that it happened at a close range. So police flew to Ohio, where Chris's sister had since relocated, and she told the police that their stepfather, Jackson, had been extremely strict and Chris was not always willing to follow his rules because Jackson wasn't his dad. Investigators, curious as to how the family could continue to live in a house with a body buried underneath it without knowing, asked the sister about the smell that must have lingered, and she told them that her parents said that a pet snake had likely died somewhere on the property. So the police called Jackson in for questioning, and he admitted that he and Chris had not gotten along well, but he reiterated his belief that Chris had run away from home, and denied the smell, which all the other family members said was like, yo, dead snake. Meanwhile, other investigators were at the family's home executing a search warrant and found a receipt suggesting that the telegram that had allegedly been sent by Chris had actually been charged to the family's home phone bill. In the records at the couple's home, police also found a revolver and ammunition that matched the injuries. You can put 2 and 2 together and make 4, right? At first, this next case seemed like a bizarre case of a middle-class family who packed up their home and fled to another continent for a new life. Neighbors of the Dupont de Ligonnès and their 4 offspring called the police when they noticed the family home in the northwestern city of Nantes seemed unusually deserted. The descendants' school had been notified of a sudden job transfer to Australia, the family's home had been emptied, and the mailbox was taped up with a note, "Return all mail to sender." But when police looked closer at the townhouse and the suspicious building work on the patio, they found a severed human leg in the garden. Further digging revealed a one-legged corpse and 4 others, and with them were the corpses of the family's 2 Labradors. To this day, police are still searching for the father, Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès. One online user mentioned their uncommon family name was changed back in the late 1920s to a very generic surname. But only 3 people knew why, and they were sworn to secrecy. The last survivor finally fessed up literally hours before he passed away. So it turns out a family member had planned to marry the daughter of a high-ranking Chicago crime family member. The capo of the crime family not only objected, since the family wasn't white, not Italian, and mixed marriages were a no-no at the time, threatened the entire family if the wedding or an elopement were to happen. So to survive, the family changed their name, moved to Wisconsin in the middle of the night, trying to disappear. The wedding never happened, but their ancestor was terrified of either the crime boss or his spurned daughter locating the family. So it was sort of a rudimentary witness protection plan. An anonymous poster online was with their great-grandmother when she died, although they'd only gone to help their mom and grandma through the process. They weren't super close with great-grandma. They were reading next to her at one point, and she piped up and was like, "You know Robin was my niece and not my sister, right?" And now this poster was like, "I don't know what you're talking about," and was like, "Yeah, of course." So great-grandma passes away the next day, and a week or so later, this online poster is like, "Hey, mom, what's this about?" So it turns out, and still at the time, when Big Sis got pregnant, kinda young, her parents sent her away and then raised what came out as a sister and not a grand. You know what I mean. A family known as the most inbred in America has been left with a series of heartbreaking genetic defects that were sparked by a pair of identical twin brothers. So the Whittakers, who live in the small village of Odd in West Virginia, have a complex history. Some of the family can only communicate through grunts and barks, and they often flee when outsiders try to speak to them. They can struggle to remember their parents and other relatives, and didn't realize until recent years that the issues were kind of due to inbreeding. The cycle of inbreeding began with identical twin brothers, Henry and John, and then their offspring married each other and had a dozen descendants. John had 9 offspring with his wife and first cousin, Ada Riggs, including one Gracie Irene Whittaker in 1920. Henry had 7 with his wife Sally, including John Emery Whittaker, who was born in 1913. John Emery and Gracie married in 1935 and had 15 descendants. The couple were double cousins, sharing both sets of grandparents, and their offspring suffered severe physical and mental defects, suspected to be, because of inbreeding. A family member said they understand what you're talking about, if you try to talk to them, and if they don't like it, they start yelling. Well, I think I know where VC Andrews got her inspiration for a lot of her writing. Well, that's all for today, folks. I've been Alexa. See ya!